the biggest story, of course, the entire country is tracking at the moment is that big farmers' protest. Once again, farmers are now heading to Delhi. Security has been intensified all across the borders from Punjab to Haryana, Haryana to Delhi. Traffic advisories have been issued, schools have been closed down, roads are, at this point fortified. Entire security apparatus in the state as well as a neighbouring state has now kicked in to ensure farmers don't reach the national capital. What exactly are farmers demanding at this point?
So, I mean, amid all the issues you mentioned, Shweta, and the fact that Delhi has been fortified and there are concrete and metal barriers placed in all entry points into Delhi, I think the barrage of people walking in, marching in, the sea of cars, there is obviously chaos, and that chaos is what the government is trying to arrest at this moment. Now, while there is obviously a disruption part of it, there is also political angle to it, but I think it's important to understand the economics of this. So, what are farmers really demanding this time around? I think farmers are very clear that I'll tell you how this is actually different from what happened in 2020, 2021 and now. So primarily, I think, why the farm laws of 2020, 2021 were repealed was primarily because farmers did not want the government security on procurement of their produce at a certain price to go. The government wanted to offer free and fair market prices at mandi minus the mandi tax minus the middlemen so that farmers' produce could go and fetch whatever is the relevant current mandi price, and that mandi price would be dependent on the vagaries of market. So in a low monsoon year when crops are low in production, there would be a higher demand for fewer grains, and those fewer grains would then fetch the farmers a higher price, right? As opposed to an MSP under which the government is going to procure that from you, and no matter how good or bad the crop cycle is, or how the yield on the farm has been, there would be that minimum price that the government would pay, and the negotiation between farmers and the government, or the buyer and the seller in a pure economic term, would be reduced, right? So actually the government, what it said in 2020, 2021 was that this is a pro-farmer sort of a rule law being enacted. What the farmers perceived it to be was that the government support and the government's hand over offering at least that minimum security to farmers is getting pulled away. So that was the crux of the issue back in 2020, 21. Eventually, the farmer side won and the government had to repeal those laws. Right?
Absolutely. But the guarantee on MSP, and that needs to be enacted in the law, that was also one of the demands in the farmers' protest of 2021. That hasn't been met just as yet.
So, I think the government has also been promising the doubling of farmers' income. MS Swaminathan, the late MS Swaminathan, just conferred with the Bharat Ratna, also had come up with this formula called C2 plus 50%, which is primarily the MSP should be based on a pricing which takes into account the fixed cost, which is the land, either the land prices, ownership of the land, or the rent that farmers pay on the land, and all the variable cost.
Labor.
Yeah, so all the variable cost for every crop production cycle. So let's say you're producing wheat, you're producing paddy, you're producing pulses on the same, arguably on the same piece of land, even though different pulses and different wheat and different paddy crops require different climatic and water conditions. But assuming that all of that is being produced on the same mass of land, then on that land, depending on how much wheat, how much pulses, how much rice is getting produced, you weight it out over the overall production. So the weighted average cost of production for the yield on the land plus all the fixed cost accrued over years onto producing that particular output to be taken into account as the weighted average cost, and then add a 50% on top of that. Now, I mean, MS Swaminathan has done great work for for the farm community, and I'm sure there would be a lot of logic in what he had proposed. But as a student of economics, it's hard to believe that any industry works on a 50% margin. What is being promised here is that whatever your cost of production is, add 50% of that and make that the minimum selling price, the MSP, on which the government is going to procure it. Now, obviously, that is going to dent the coffers of the government. The government's own expenditure on procuring essentials like food grains and vegetables is going to prohibit that 50% delta over the cost of production. So this is one part of what the farmers are demanding this time. So they want the MS Swaminathan Commission, rules to be finally formalized, and the C2 plus 50% formula gets implemented as MSP. In addition to that,
there are other demands as well.
Yeah. So in addition to that, there is demand for pension. There is demand for debt waiver. Now all of these are going to again add to the expenditure of the government and the economic burden of the government. So that is going to be difficult for the government to agree, simply because we have our own fiscal deficit targets. We have our own calculation done on how much we are going to get by way of taxes, how much can we spend by way of SOPs. Farm income in any case happens to be tax-free. So the government is not earning anything out of the farm sector. It needs to, as per the demands, pay that 50% markup on the average cost of production. And then these demands of debt waiver, demands of pension is something which is obviously going to burn a large hole in the coffers of the government. In addition to that, what the government now seems to be agreeing to somewhat is that the farmers want the cases against the protesters of 2021, 2020, 2021 to be withdrawn. Right. So that is something where the government may be able to play a softball, may be able to come up with some sort of a negotiation and give in to the demands of the farmers. But overall, I think all these economic costs which the farmers are demanding, it's going to be difficult for the government to match up. And the complexity increases because we are again right in the forefront of the upcoming election season, and farming being a large political community and a large vote bank, is going to be difficult for the government to match up to their expectations or negotiate a way out of their demands one way or another.
All right. So negotiations have been on for a while now, and since negotiations failed to reach any conclusion, hence which the farmers are now marching. In fact, we are now told that they have started marching to Delhi from 10 a.m. onward. We'll try and get you more visuals of how the traffic is panning out in Delhi NCR region. Borders have been closed down at this point. But, since we're discussing the economics of it, economically, it does not make any sense at this point in time. So, of course, the minimum guarantee on MSP and the fact that that should be a part of the law is what government agreed on even back in 2021.
That's right.
But all the other demands, so to say, the demand for pension and debt waivers seems new.
So, yeah, I mean, it
and
definitely
extraordinary.
Yeah, so this is definitely an addition to what the conflict was or what the clash was back in 3 years ago, 2020, 2021. But again, I think MSP or any sort of incentive that you want to give, any scheme that the government rolls out, there has to be a definite time frame for that. I mean, you want this MSP to be set at C2 plus 50% for how long? So there has to be a time frame.
But government way back in 2014 did promise a minimum guarantee on MSP. In fact, farmers are suggesting even that promise has not
So I think the formula that the government has used is not the formula which has been suggested by MS Swaminathan.
Right.
And the farmers believe that the government has tried to hoodwink them by tweaking that formula and arriving at an MSP which is actually not giving them an additional 50% over their weighted cost of production, which MS Swaminathan had suggested. So I think overall, again, whether you follow Formula 1 or Formula 2, there's another formula also which is A2 plus FL. So, I mean, I don't know how that is calculated. Again, I think that is on the basis of the appreciated farmland prices. But broadly speaking, I think if there is a time frame set, how long do you want the government to incentivize the farm sector?
Absolutely.
It is in any case tax-free. You want to give this waiver for a year, for 3 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, forever. I think
want to give it at all is also the question, because the government is not relenting at this point.
Absolutely. So I'm saying, if you want to make sure that you have given yourself a target that in the next 5 years you want the farmer income to double, farm income to double across the board. It is one of the constituencies of the Modi government right now. Modi's guarantees for a Viksit Bharat come on the back of the farming community, come on the back of women, which are 50% of the agriculture labor force. So broadly speaking, I think it is going to be difficult for the government to have an indefinite MSP and an indefinitely large formula of 50% more than actual price cost of production. And if there is no time frame set to that, then it's going to be difficult to introduce some sort of an incentive right now and withdraw it post elections, withdraw it after 3 years, withdraw it anywhere in the next 5 years as you head to the 2029 elections also for that matter.
But taking a cue from what happened in 2021, which is the government for many months did not relent, even when farmers were here in the Tikri border, they were in the Sindhu border, they were at Red Fort, they were here for months on stretch, and this was at the peak of pandemic.
Winters and winter months, it was biting
of
cold.
Winter months.
True.
And months after that, we heard Prime Minister finally giving in to the demands, caving into the demands. It does not look like that may just happen.
I think, the giving in at that time, Shweta, rightly so, if I could add, was that you repealed the farm laws which were not conducive as perceived by the farmers in their interest.
Right.
So you've repealed those laws which you had newly enacted. Right. So that is one part of it. The other part is this demand for MSP at 50% additional over the cost of production is something which the government is going to find a financial burden to uphold and adhere to for years to come. So I think that negotiation has to come through by the basis of derivation of an equally conducive formula which the farm community will also agree to and the government will not burn too much of a hole, and some sort of a definite time frame. Absolutely. Beyond which those subsidies would go.
All right, but it looks like the government does not want farmers to march to Delhi, at least today. There is heavy fortification of Delhi. We continue to get you all those visuals where farmers are hoping to move to Delhi starting 10 o'clock this morning. Visuals on your screen suggest that there is, in fact, borders which have been sealed at this point between Haryana to Punjab and Haryana to Delhi. Government does not want farmers to move Delhi. It does not look like a right appropriate time. Also, this comes on the back of elections, the much awaited general elections, Lok Sabha elections in about 2 months from now. So it's not a very good picture for the government of India. But farmers there, of course, demanding a minimum guarantee on MSP and a debt waiver, as well as a pension to go forward. Whether these demands will be met favorably, we don't know, but the current conversation between the Government of India, Union Government, as well as Farmers Union, 200 of them, is currently on.